You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM. And for any of you who've listened for any amount of time, you'll know one of the shows that I love doing is Life Stories. And I've got the privilege and pleasure of doing another episode of that. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Tina Cross. Hi, Tina.
Hi.
Great to have you here. Obviously, this has been, people wouldn't know this off air, but it's been a bit of a long time coming. You've been kind of considering doing this for a while, but thank you for taking the time out to come and share a bit about your life and faith and why that's important to you. So let's get things rolling with the kind of first part of the conversation. Tell us a little bit, like we always start with this, tell us a bit about your upbringing, life growing up for you. What was life like for you in your kind of early days?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this, and growing up was quite confusing. My family were Orthodox Jews, and we lived in a Jewish community in Cardiff in Wales. All very good, all very together. And then at the age of 8, my parents got divorced, which 50 odd years ago, 60 years ago, was unheard of.
Right.
And consequently, I thought that was my fault, and nobody else I knew had got parents that were divorced.
Sure.
And I was sent to live with my grandmother, which was my mum's mum, who was a Russian lady who didn't speak much English, very authoritarian. And she lived with my mum's sister, my Auntie Hetty, and my Uncle Lionel, and they had a child, Hayden, who was a little bit older than me. And I always felt like the spare person.
Right.
Nobody really seemed to take any notice of me. I tried really hard. I passed the 11 plus. I was okay. And then I think when I just passed the 11 plus, I went to a pantomime with my father. And when I came back, my bubba, that's my grandmother, had died.
Right.
And I used to live in a room with her, and she was a diabetic, and I always remember sticking needles in her legs, but she was my grandmother. She was the only one that really cared for me.
Sure.
And from there...
what age were you there? What age?
I was 11.
Okay.
So after that happened, my father wasn't allowed custody of me, and I had to stay with my auntie and uncle. And I just kept going back and forth between my father and my stepmother, whom we never got on.
Yeah.
She was only 10 years older than me and resented me, and I resented her.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to go back to my auntie and my uncles. And then one day my father said, "They don't want you, Tina." So when I went to grammar school, and I just got into trouble.
Yeah.
I just rebelled against everything, and
just from a place of that hurt of
I just didn't know who I was, and I thought it was all my fault, and nobody wanted me, and I didn't know what to do. I tried being good. I played hockey for Wales.
Wow.
I played my 11 plus. Nobody, saw me being good, and I remember making a conscious decision when I was 12 that I was going to be bad, and people would take notice of me. And from there on, things just gradually got worse.
And this was, what sort of age was that then?
12, 13.
Okay, so still really quite young.
Yeah, so when I was 12, I got taken to court by the police for 6 counts of robbery with violence, for stealing kids' dinner money. I got fined £1 shilling. And then when I was 13, my stepmother, I don't know how it happened, but I was told I was out of parental control, and I was put into a proof school.
Wow.
Which I loved, actually, because I was an only child. And this approved school was a big house in Calne in Wiltshire, with about 12 other kids in it. It was on a farm, and it was brilliant. And I stayed there till I was 15. My mum had disappeared between 13 to 15, 16, and my mum, bless her heart, was like a child. My grandmother was a strict authoritarian. My mum didn't even know how to boil an egg.
Right.
And she couldn't handle responsibility.
Yeah.
I keep saying sorry.
No, that's fine.
Then what happened? Then I can remember being sat in the approved school at the end of a phone waiting for my mum to ring, and she never did.
Yeah.
She never did.
So it was obviously in all of those ways really a kind of really difficult, challenging upbringing, looking for
love,
the
really.
attention, affirmation, love that we all need. It's not something that's wrong to crave. We all need it as growing up. So as you said, you didn't find it in being good, in kind of having good performance in athletic stuff, in school performance. So you thought, well, stuff this. I'm going to try the opposite side of it. And that's where kind of things develop for you. We're going to stop there for some music, and we're going to talk more with Tina right after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM. I'm in conversation with Tina Cross. If you've just tuned in, this will be available on our website on Listen Again. You'll be able to listen at your leisure, and also we'll pop the video up of it on YouTube as well. So a couple of places you can kind of catch up. We've just had the first section, so you've just tuned in relatively early on. So Tina, take us from there, from starting to get into trouble, later kind of teenage years and things like that. How did things develop for you?
Okay, so I was in improved school till I was 16.
Yeah.
My mum didn't really focus in my life, and in fact, when I was born, she didn't come out of hospital for 6 weeks because she had peritonitis. So I never really bonded with my mother. It was with my dad.
Right.
I was always my dad's girl. So from 16, from coming out of approved school, I went back to live with my father and my stepmother, who by then had 2 children by my father. And we really did not get on at all. So I started, in those days, it was sex, drugs and rock and roll, hippies, tune in, turn on, drop in, drop out. And that's what I did. What
sort of, without giving away your age, what sort of years was this? Was this
that
60s,
was,
70s or?
So 50, about 68.
Right.
So about 67, 68.
Peak kind of hippie, free love movement.
Yeah, I went to the first Glastonbury.
Right.
When you didn't have to pay to get in.
Yeah.
I went to the Isle of Wight and got kicked off the Isle of Wight.
Right.
It was a mad time. But in Cardiff, we had the docks, which was the Badlands. And I sort of went from a very posh part of the city because my father and stepmother lived in Whitchurch, and just moved down to the docks because I was accepted there.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I was the young white kid that had a little car, because by 17 and 18, my dad had got me a car. And I know I was being used, but I was accepted.
I was going to say, so you were more useful.
Yeah, I was very useful, yeah.
But from your perspective, you were thinking, hang on, I'm getting some attention here.
Yeah, and that's when drugs came in.
Right.
So that was a major... I decided when I was like 14, 15, I was going to become a junkie.
Wow. That's quite a decision to make at that age.
Yeah.
And so that was an active...
conscious decision.
Conscious, fully aware, this is the life I want to go for at that age.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was 16, 17, when I came back home that I got introduced to heroin.
Wow.
So I'd smoked a lot of weed, did a lot of amphetamines, which was the house, it was they used to call it the helper, the housewife's helper, like it was Phylon and all these tablets and that.
Yeah.
And then somebody introduced me to heroin.
Wow.
And to injecting, and it just changed my life for the worse. But
yeah, of course.
It numbs you. It just numbs you, so you don't have to feel anything.
And did you, was this something you made aware to your dad, to parents and stuff? Was it something you kept really hidden, the using and that, or were they just were they aware of all of that at that stage?
It was obvious because I was just all over the place, and I was I was a serious junkie.
Yeah.
I wasn't just dabbling.
Yeah.
I started thieving.
I was going to say, how did you kind of get the stuff?
I started thieving. I started doing a lot of forgery.
Yeah.
I was in a lot of trouble with the police. I've done about 5 years in prison altogether in various sentences, which probably saved my life.
Really? Yeah.
I went into rehabs and got kicked out and went on remand. And that probably saved my life. So that took me to, when I was 18, I got a job with I always wanted to be a solicitor. Anyway, my father got me a job with Leo Absey's solicitors in Cardiff. I don't know if they're there anymore. And I was a secretary, but I couldn't hold it together. And after about 3 months, I just hit full-on crime. So that's 18, 19.
Wow. So still teenage years at this
point. Yeah. 21, 22 was becoming the height of my drug phase. I got pregnant when I was 23. And I've always believed in God, but he was this fella that sat in the sky with a big long grey beard and a big stick waiting to whack you on the head when you got there.
Right.
So that was my vision of God.
And I was going to ask you about faith, seeing as you've raised it. So you said you were raised in a Jewish family.
Yeah.
Was it very religious Jewish as well? Were they sort of practicing in that sense?
Yeah,
so was
practicing.
Did you feel you had a faith in terms of Judaism yourself as such?
Judaism, really? It's a really funny thing because it's more about a culture. Not all Jews believe in God.
Right.
There's a lot of rituals involved, which is really strange because so is drug addiction, is very ritualistic. But we were an Orthodox family, so we had Shabbos.
Yeah.
And I always found it hypocritical because on a Friday night and a Saturday, you're not supposed to drive or do anything physical.
Yeah.
And you'd get all of them driving their cars, parking around the corner from the shul, and then going on in and being extremely religious. So I found it very hypocritical.
Sure.
All these families that are so much for the family had affairs here and there, and I'm probably a little bit biased. But yeah, so it was religious. We read the scriptures, the Torah.
Yeah. So in the back of your mind, you had this belief in God.
Yeah.
From sort of that sort of upbringing.
Yeah, I sort of knew quite a bit about the Old Testament. Didn't understand it, but I knew all those great stories Abraham, Isaac, just all of that. It was part of Elijah used to come on a Friday night and he'd fill up a glass of wine and then it would be gone in the morning and for the stranger at the table. So it was all in fact that's part of how I came to know Christ.
Yeah, of course.
Which I'll tell you in a bit. That's a bit later on.
Well, it's a good place to stop for some more music. We'll pick up the conversation with Tina after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. Too much really to recap from where we are already, but we're in part 3 talking with Tina. And Tina, you've touched on in the previous sections about your mum, obviously your mum and dad splitting, but that was a major thing in the culture that you were part of, wasn't it?
Yes.
Being raised Orthodox Jew, that wasn't a done thing, and but much more extreme than that. Do you want to tell us
my mother left my father, who was a Jewish man and a Jewish child, for a non-Jewish man, a yok.
Right.
And consequently, the Jewish community, it was the same as being excommunicated. She wasn't allowed any contact with all of us, with the shul, with the synagogue, with the family, with me. I wasn't allowed to have any pictures of her.
Wow.
Everything to do with my mother was destroyed because she was a non-person.
So not only did you miss a connection with her from the standpoint of she wasn't really there emotionally, but physically, in terms of the community you were part of, they wanted you to see her as if she'd died, essentially.
I wasn't allowed to talk about her or discuss her. And my dad, bless him, was a really nice guy, and there was lots of talk about my mum being a kurva, which is like Yiddish for a prostitute. She wasn't. She was just very immature. My dad called her a mashugana, which means she's a little bit messed up in the head.
Right.
And she was just like a child.
Sure.
Like a child.
So you had that going on in the sense that she probably wasn't there for you maternally as a mum anyway, but then that whole excommunicating thing was a whole extra deal. In the last section, one of the things you touched upon to speak a bit more about was you became pregnant.
I did,
in your early 20s.
23. Well.
So at around the time when you said, 21, 22 was peak drug addiction and stuff. So then what did that do to you in terms of the whole mix of everything?
Okay, so I had an abortion when I was 17, and that messed with my head totally. And I always believed that God was going to punish me and I was never going to have a child. I'd always wanted a child because I had a lot of love. And I thought, I can just give it to this child and everything's going to be wonderful. Anyway.
So when you were, obviously feel free to answer this or not, but was that an abortion of your decision at 17 or not really?
Not really.
Sure.
Not really, but...
I only pick up on that because you said it messed with your head. So
it did,
kind of seems like...
Not really.
Yeah.
I don't think I was very fit to be a mother,
Sure.
which I really wasn't at 23 either. But it wasn't my decision, but I had it.
So that going from there, thinking God's going to punish you,
Yeah.
you're never going to have another kid, to then
Yeah.
falling pregnant.
Yeah.
What did that do for you then in terms of, did that bring a sense of some element of hope? What did it do for you?
It's really strange because I knew the night I got pregnant. That's another whole story because the father of my daughter was a really good guy. He didn't do drugs. In fact, he worked for my dad because my dad had a garage in Cardiff. And the thing was, he wanted to make an honest woman out of me.
Sure.
And I didn't want to be an honest woman.
Yeah.
And his family were black Christians. So I made a decision that I wasn't going to tell him he was the father because they'd have taken Emma away from me because I wasn't a fit mother.
Right.
So Emma doesn't know who her father is. There's no father's name on the birth certificate. I mean, you've only got to look at her really and you know whose child she is. Anyway, it was wonderful. I stopped injecting. I was still using weed and amphetamine. But praise God, the birth was fine. I was there on my own. My dad knew and was very supportive. And it got to be such a crazy time. I married this guy, Eddie, who was lovely. But I wasn't ready to settle. I went straight back into gear. So Emma's first couple of years were really rocky. I loved her. I loved her dearly, but I wasn't a good mum.
Sure.
I loved drugs more.
Well, I suppose you weren't in a place in your own
addiction
personhood to be a good mum in that
addiction
sense.
takes over everything.
Sure.
And it's like when you've got what you need, then everything else comes into place. Oh, well, I need to do this, that and the other. But until you get what you need, everything else comes second.
Did it get ever close to her being taken away from you with social services and things like that? Or?
What happened was, I was on probation for 10 years. In fact, they gave me a watch when I left, being with her for so long. The guy, Emma's social worker, was a guy called Tecwyn Davis. And he was a really good guy. And Emma was so faithful. And your kids are so faithful, regardless of what mess you are. So Emma lived with me, and we had, every now and again, I'd go into rehab or I'd be on remand for a couple of weeks, and Emma would go into this home in Cardiff for a couple of days. And then that went on. And then when Emma was 8, I really hit rock bottom. I was really, I'd been in lots of trouble with the police, so it wasn't so easy for me to get gear. And it was harder and harder. And I got sent to prison for 6 months, and it was the only time my dad ever came to see me in prison. And my dad loved me, but he couldn't choose between me, and he had a wife and 3 other children, and so we used to sort of meet secretly.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came to see me in prison, and he just said, look, if you love Emma, you'll give her up for fostering. So I really thought about that. That was really hard. And I did. I put her in. They wanted to put her up for adoption. She said no, and I said no. Because
presumably that then severs the ties with you.
Yeah.
Pretty firmly.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have done anything. I would have just gone. How I'm still alive is by the grace of God, even though I didn't know him.
Yeah. Well, we're at a point where we need to stop for some music again. So we'll catch up with that conversation and where you were there. It's a good point to jump off from. We'll talk more after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. Fourth part of our interview here with Tina Cross, who is here in the studio. And we've got this on video. We're going to stick this on Listen Again. So if you've just joined us, don't worry, you'll be able to catch up at your leisure. So Tina, now where the story kind of was is that you were in and out of prison for you'd been in and out of prison a lot, but this was kind of a bit more serious, and you had your daughter in tow, and you were thinking, right, the best thing is probably to put her into foster care. Tell us how kind of that moved forward. Okay,
so I was in Pucklechurch. It was a remand centre at the time, and I'd had a 12-month prison sentence. My dad came to see me, and a social worker came to see me, and I ended up getting an extra 3 months because I hit her, because she was saying about Emma being adopted. But anyway, I agreed that she could be fostered. And Emma went to court and said she has a mum. She wants to be fostered. My mum's not well. That's how Emma used to say it.
Yeah.
And
how old was she at that point?
Emma was 8.
Right.
So it had been a really in and out thing. I was like gouching out in a school, and she was really protective of me. My mum's not very well, and it was no life for a kid.
Yeah.
And she went into foster care. When she was 8, she went with a family that wasn't very good. And when I came out of prison, I tried to find her, and I was the mother from hell.
Right.
I foster now, okay,
Yeah.
and I would hate to have somebody like me
As the
minding
mum.
it. Yeah, as the mum.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually they moved her to Sutton to get her away from Cardiff and Barry, where I was.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out. But she got sent to, because she was quite a bright kid. And between my father and the social services, she ended up going to a private school in Lyme Regis.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called, Roadhouse, I can't remember. Where she made a really good friend called Amo, who's still friends with her now.
Yeah.
And she actually got fostered by the English teacher, whose name was Dee, who is an amazing woman. And she fostered Emma till she was 16, Dee and Tom. Emma still sees her now. And in fact, Dee was the person who said we should foster now that we're good. It was great. I've met Dee. Emma still sees her. She was very, very positive in Emma's life.
Great.
Emma then went to Exeter College, and she went to Southampton and did media and film studies. She's now a children's book writer.
Nice.
Married.
Sorry, go on.
Married with I got 2 grandchildren, Samuel and Maisie, 16 and 15.
Amazing.
She lives in Bournemouth.
So quite a remarkable way
Totally.
that chapter turned around.
Amazing.
For you. So, I mean, obviously we're limited for time on this interview. So for you in those years then, where were you? Were you in any way starting to get things together, or what was your...
No, when Emma went into... she went into foster care. And when she was 11, I think I came out of prison, and I went to meet her, and she just didn't want anything to do with me.
Yeah.
She said, I don't like your friends. You're still doing drugs. The only time you get hold of me is when you're in prison to write to me. She's not interested.
Yeah.
So I didn't see her then from 12, 13 till she was 16. And in those years, I just sank even lower and lower. I tried everything to get money, so I'll just leave that to people's imagination. Everything,
of course,
of which I'm very much ashamed.
But so, I guess as well with what you've shared about your upbringing, in that sense, that you encountered rejection from your parents, from people around you there. So then to have that from your own child, I imagine just exacerbated everything.
Yeah, and I couldn't live up to what she wanted from me.
And you were aware of that as well.
Yeah. An addiction, I was not only addicted to heroin, opiates, morphine, Diconol, etc., but to the needle, because it's a whole ritual, and that's where you get your relief. And, I would inject everywhere, anywhere, 8-10 times a day and night. It was just madness. And then I moved, then I went, a bit another space, then I went back into prison, and I went to... the Women's Open Prison in Underlyme, whatever. And I came out of there, and I didn't know where to go. So I put a pin in a map, and I ended up in Norwich,
right,
where I stayed in the Young Women's Christian place, which was horrendous. So I'd made a decision I was going to stop using heroin.
Right.
So I bought a kilo of amphetamine and got on a train and went down to Plymouth.
Right.
Actually,
yeah.
Because a lady I'd met in prison, who was she was in prison for a driving thing, had said, if I'm ever stuck, come down. She lived in Tavistock, so I went down there. I stayed with her for a little while. She was weird.
Yeah, well, interesting point to stop it, but we're going to have to stop that for some music now and pick up with Tina right after this.
Gone off.
You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth with Tina Cross. We've covered a lot of ground. I always find with these interviews there's a lot more we could share. I feel like we could do a couple of hours. But so at this stage of your life, just for those who haven't heard the whole interview, in and out of trouble from a very young age, in and out of drugs from a very young age. You said that you made a decision to be a junkie at the age of about 15, which is
13, 14. I mean.
Wow. So quite a decision, and that obviously carried through.
Yeah.
So then at this stage of your life, kind of much further along down the line, with a child who's in foster care, you're wanting to get free of it at this point to some extent. Is that the case, or what's your situation?
Not really.
Right.
It wasn't as clear as that. So the last time I went into prison was 1988.
Yeah.
Emma was about 15, 16 in those days. When I came out of prison in 1988, I'd had enough. I didn't want to go to prison. So I sort of wanted to try and get my life somehow sorted. So I made a decision that I wasn't going to use opiates anymore because I was either gouching out or it was harder to get hold of. And I, in my mind, decided to do amphetamine.
Sure. So there wasn't a desire to get free fully? Just
no.
Change one
No,
for the other.
just so it looked like I was more in control than I was.
Yeah.
And I moved down, a long story cut short, because there's so much that I could talk about. I really want to talk about how my life changed. Needless to say, my life was a seriously dark, horrid, lonely place.
Yeah.
Okay, no way out, no way out.
I was going to say, no way of finding a release.
No.
Because when you're that deep into addiction, you're stuck.
Yeah. And my daughter I'd sort of given up on.
Yeah.
And she'd given up on me. Anyway, eventually I got down to Cornwall. I met this guy. I moved in as his housekeeper, and he used to pay me a half ounce of weed a week.
Right.
And then I used to do trips up and down to London, pick up a quantity of amphetamine, sell that, and use what I'd made. I was never fantastic at keeping any money because I used to put it all up my arm.
Yeah.
So I was still extremely addicted. In those days, I used to walk with sticks because I had a deep vein thrombosis from injecting in my groin.
Yeah.
And eventually I got to a doctor in Camelford, and they gave me methamphetamine on prescription because my circulation was I got Raynaud's in my hands, very poor, to help me stop using street drugs. Anyway, during this time, there was a festival on Davidstow Moor called the White Goddess Festival. And I lived in a ramshackled old place in just outside Camelford, Trengoon Mill, which was an old house with a big mill up there. It was really tatty and whatever. And I rented it, which I never paid rent for. And I went to this festival, and I was selling amphetamine and ecstasy and whatever. And this guy called, it's now my husband Dave, or Busker Dave in those days, so, he was horrible. He had bright sort of reddish hair with a big long dread at the back and big boots, smelly and really like that.
And he was an addict as well.
He was an addict as well. Anyway, he bought some stuff off me, came back, moaned at me and said I'd ripped him off, which was a load of rubbish. I didn't. Gave him some more, and the next thing I knew, he crashed on the back of my car.
Yeah.
And I drove off with him at the end of the festival. And he moved in with me into this place, Trengoon Mill. And it was like a love in a minute, hate next minute, because he was using all my drugs and there wasn't enough for both of us. And he was a bit of a slob and whatever. And amphetamine makes you very hard-hearted. Again, it's controlling your emotions so you don't feel. It takes you away from that. Anyway, 1992, I think it was, 91, 92, my dad came to see me the last time before he died and just said to me, he's going to take care of Emma when he dies. He's not going to give me any money because he knows what I'll do with it. But we'd sorted all that out. Anyway, in the beginning of 93, David met the Lord. And eventually plucked up courage to tell me. And all I remember saying to him was, listen, mate, talk is cheap. Don't show me this. Don't tell me about this Jesus. Show me. And he just started to change. Anyway, in July, the guy that had been speaking with David got us tickets to go to Cross Rhythms, which was a music festival. And Dave said to me, do you want to go to this festival? I went, yeah, I love festivals. He said, it's a Christian festival. I don't care if it's a Russian festival. I love festivals. So we went to the festival, Cross Rhythms. This is July the 11th, 1993. And I can remember turning up and I was driving this banged up old Fiat with a roof thing, you know, where you go through the roof and everybody's standing up, like driving the car in.
Yeah.
And they were telling me I got to park somewhere else. And I said, no, I'm going to park in the middle. And I just parked in the middle of the field. And I was walking with sticks because of my deep vein thing. And anyway, David was off holier than thou, getting ministry and listening to speakers and this, that, and the other. I was left wandering on my own. I didn't have a clue what was happening. Yeah. And I wandered into this tent, this marquee, and there must have been, I suppose, about 200 people in there. And there was this guy speaking, and his name was Bruce Oliver and the Joshua Generation. And I walked in, and he was speaking about blood covenants. So with my Jewish upbringing, I know what a blood covenant is. It's about making a promise. And he said that every time you sleep with somebody, you make a blood covenant with the devil, with this person. And then it just came into my head that so every time I injected, which was a blood covenant, that was wrong.
Yeah.
And I just... I actually felt like, you know, the dummies you get in the doctor's surgeries where they're plastic and you can see they're for teaching and training. You see all the veins and the capillaries and that, you know, the see-through plastic. That's how I felt I looked.
Wow.
I felt that everybody could see through my skin to what was going on inside of me. And I felt so dirty, so dirty. And then I actually heard, not in my head, not in my heart, an audible voice say, Tina. And I went, look, because I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And I looked around, it said Tina Marks, which was my name then. I love you, and I love you just as you are. And I just started to sob. And I couldn't stop sobbing. And I wandered out of the tent, and there was one girl I knew there, Karen, and I knocked on her caravan door. I still couldn't speak. I was sobbing my heart out. And this was like getting late. And she thought that because of my sticks and I had a bad back and my leg was blown up, that I was in pain. So she said, I'm going to take you up to the tent for healing. There's healing going on in prayer. So by the time we got there, it's like 11, 12 o'clock at night. So when we got into the tent at the top, it was like all like tumbleweed, you know, like in the cowboy films where you see everyone's just dirty tumbleweed. Nobody there. I'm still sobbing. I haven't said a word to Karen. I just can't stop crying.
Yeah.
And this lady came out who happened to be Bruce Oliver's wife, Sharon Oliver.
Wow.
So Karen must have said something to her, and she came up to me and she stood about the distance that we are here.
Yeah.
And she said, can I pray for you? And I went, yeah, okay. So she gave me this little booklet called Knowing God Personally. It's a little green thing. I've still got it. And all it says is that I'm going to take myself off the throne and I'm going to put you on the throne and I'm going to trust you, Jesus. And that's the first time I'd heard Jesus, that you are who you say you are, that you can do the things you say you're going to do, that you are the Son of God, that you died and you rose again, and that you will forgive me of my sins. She said, could you say this prayer and mean it? And I just sobered up because I've been using the whole time.
Sure.
I just knew what I was saying. I didn't know what it meant, but I meant what I said then. And then she prayed for me. I fell on the floor, which is the only time I've really fallen on the floor in 30 years.
Yeah.
And she prayed for me, and I had a couple of shakes and shivers and whatever that I'm assuming, and people say that was what they call deliverance.
Right.
I got up, went back to my car, because that's where I was staying, was in the car. tried to roll myself a spliff, couldn't find my weed. Then I heard this lady singing in tongues, which was beautiful, over me, and everybody running around the campsite saying, have you heard what's happened to that woman? The one with the shaved head and the dreadlocks and with the sticks. Have you heard what's happened to her? And then I knew something had changed. I didn't know what. I didn't know what. So from there, because Dave was off holier than I, didn't want nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Lots of other stuff went on. The guys at Crossroads were praying for me instead of kicking me out. And it was all nothing that I did. I didn't understand any of it, really. And so we drove back. And at this point in time, David and I were living together but separate in this house, not Trengoo Mill, Truill Farm, near like this most amazing couple in Cornwall, Ken and Hilda MacLeod, who sort of became like our parents.
Yeah.
And we were in the house. Anyway, by this time, David had been going to church in Camelford and going to Ken and Hilda's for a Bible study every time, saying, do you want to come? I go, no, thanks. Not interested. So about 6-7 weeks later, Dave has gone to a prayer meeting at Ken and Hilda's, and I've sat in the house. I can't find anything to read because he's been through the house like a dose of salts, throwing out anything that's anti-God or anything. So the only thing I could find was a Bible, and it was a New Testament. I'd never read a New Testament. So I thought, okay, so where do I start? So I know, being a Jew, I look at the book of Hebrews. And I started to read, and in Hebrews, it says about how Jesus is the sacrifice once and for all, and that he is the Passover lamb. Well, I remember from in Israel when they came out of Egypt and they put the blood on the lintel of the door so that the wrath of God would pass over the firstborn kids. And I went, okay, if you are who you say you are, Jesus, then you're going to have to do this for me because my faith is in a needle and I don't know how to stop. I said, so I'm going to trust you, and you're going to have to sort it out. And with that, I got my syringe and because I was getting ampoules of methamphetamine from the GP on script, put them in a Rayburn, and I went, okay, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, you need to do what you say you can do.
Yeah.
And I've never, ever injected since that time.
No way.
Never wanted to.
Wow.
I had no withdrawals. I was in bed for about 2 or 3 days, but
which is impossible. Based on
totally.
Addiction, there's at the very least extreme cold turkey from that.
Totally.
Stage.
I used to have fits. Yeah, it was a miracle. I mean, even now, sometimes I sit and I think, was I really that bad?
Yeah.
Did that really happen? But it did.
Yeah.
And I was.
Yeah.
God just totally changed. I hate drugs with a passion. I hate what they do to people.
Sure.
I was still smoking weed, which I gave up about 6 months later because there's a whole load of other things that I could say what we're doing. But
sure.
I've never...
That extreme promise you made as a 13, 14-year-old to be a junkie ended at that stage.
It did. It totally did.
That's amazing. We're going to stop for some music there and come back to the final part of this interview with Tina right after this. You're listening to Cross Rhythms, Plymouth 96.3 FM. And this is Life Stories, the final part of our interview. Tina, we could talk for a lot longer. We could definitely do a couple of hours. We've got to the point where you've encountered Jesus for the first time. He's freed you from addiction in a really miraculous way. Now, obviously, that was some years ago. So, I mean, this is a hard thing to answer in short, but how different has your life been since then from before then? I suppose is the easiest way to ask
totally
the question.
Black from white, light from dark, seriously. So what I forgot to say was we got married in 1993, which was a whole thing in itself.
Yeah.
And then we got baptized September the 5th in Port Isaac, which was great. Then we got married, and then my life started to change because I'm not stupid and I just wasted my time. I got kicked out of school, so I didn't do my studies. And scripture, reading the word of God, I think was the most important thing to us. Both of us used to study the word all the time. And we had great teaching, biblical, sound, not stupid teaching, really good teaching. And then we went and we worked in Gilead for a while. It's a Christian rehab as house parents, where we probably learned a lot more about ourselves as well.
Yeah, of course.
And then we left there and we felt God was calling us to do other work. So just, we used to go into all the prisons, giving our testimony. We ran a house for guys called Carrie's House for prisoners that had wanted to make a change in their life.
Sure.
Then we opened up a day centre in Torquay called Project 58 from Isaiah 58. The scriptures that God's given me are many, but one was, I want to shine like a light in a crooked and perverse generation. And I'm going to lay hold of that for which Christ laid hold of me.
Yeah.
That, for me, is a major, major scripture in my life. So
your life really went from one of totally lost in the most extremes of addiction that you could possibly be in, really, in terms of the extent to which you were an addict.
I was so angry with the world. I thought everything was my fault. I hated everybody, and I thought everybody hated me.
Totally a place of rejection.
Totally.
To then being so found. And that, I love the thing you said that you talked about very briefly, but was so profound, is the first thing you felt God say to you is, Tina, I love you for who you are. Just being loved by him motivated the rest of it. That's what transformed your heart and invited you in.
Wonderful.
And from that, then, what I think is so powerful is you went from being in trouble yourself, not just to receiving it for yourself, but then receiving it to then give that to other people, whether it was people in prison, whether it was ex-addicts, whether it was all of that. So you were kind of part of then the rescue mission for the other people who were like you.
Love never fails. I mean, at the minute, we now foster a little boy who's got more letters after his name than the Prime Minister. But love never fails.
Yeah.
And we have a hope, a living hope. You know, if I only lived in this world, what's the point? I might as well just get stone cut off and get on with it. Yeah. But we don't. We have a real hope. Yeah. We have a future. God has been so, so good to us. And I do feel loved. I don't have to perform. It's because it's nothing I do. Nothing I can do can make God love me anymore, which is,
or make him love you any
or
less.
make him love me any less. And trust me,
you tried.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah,
amazing. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but that's an amazing place to leave it. Tina, thank you so much for your time, and we'll bless you in whatever the future holds.